If you're dating after 40 and you keep attracting Mr. Unavailable on repeat, and what you really want is lasting love with Mr. Right, you're in the right place. In today's episode, we're talking about one of the biggest blocks to finding healthy love, the emotional caretaker identity. Let's go. Welcome to episode 50. You're not too much, you're just used to overgiving. Today, we're talking about releasing that identity of the emotional caretaker and what that looks like and feels like to you. And talking about confusing love with effort. Even that might start pinging something off for you, because I know I spent so many years, and of course was taught to be that way, is to caretake everyone in the room and be hypersensitive, hyper vigilant to what was going on and the emotional landscape. So how could you not develop that identity? That's how I think of it anyway. But there is hope. There is a way to unravel that and step away from that identity so that you can have the love that you truly desire. This too much kind of feeling and overgiving and being that really caring person, but overly so to the point where you're exhausting yourself, is a survival strategy. And it's a reason that you keep attracting these emotionally unavailable men. We want to talk about the shift to self-leading and trusting yourself, and to receiving, as we talked about in episode 49, the first episode of season 5, where we're diving into the integration and embodiment of a woman, your identity as someone who receives that healthy, emotionally available kind of love. It involves choosing what you desire, choosing what's best for you. Let's talk about this emotional caretaker kind of pattern. I'm going to give you some examples. The emotional caretaker looks like someone who's always listening, always understanding, explains things, not only explains themselves, but also explains what the other person is going through. So it's kind of like, let me tell you what I think is going on with you. And it's that kind of energy, and someone who is so attentive to the other person that they're able to actually explain what that person is feeling in their eyes anyway. And always will give the benefit of the doubt. Well, he's going through so much right now, so of course he's being more quiet. So of course he's pulled away because, he's going through this thing with his mother or his job. And you say, I'll just help him through this, and stays longer than is healthy for her. I did that in a number of relationships where I was like, well, once we get over this hump, or once this thing has cleared away, or once the job is less stressful, or once we get settled in, or when we have more time. I always had that extended timeline. Like, we'll just give it a bit more time because I wanted to be compassionate. You can ask yourself, am I a compassionate person? But it's showing up in this emotional caretaker in a way that is taking that emotional space away from you. It's taking that emotional care from you. You're taking that from yourself. And playing devil's advocate, some people may say, well, there's nothing wrong with being compassionate and giving and open-hearted, and that's what we should be striving for. Absolutely. Unless you've been raised by a narcissist, or unless you've been in an emotionally abusive home and upbringing where you were taught to only care for others and cut that care off from yourself. And that's where you need to be discerning. Am I being compassionate, or am I being neglectful to myself? And what's really happening is, so if you're over functioning in that way, if you're extremely compassionate, extremely understanding, giving someone the benefit of the doubt, staying longer to make sure that you've really tried everything from every angle. If you're over functioning in that way, that means that your partner is under functioning emotionally. And that's what feels familiar to you, because you're picking up all the pieces. You've got all the balls in the air. You've learned that love means managing other people's feelings. And so you're attuned to that, and you're ready for that. And you're always like the Girl Scout. You're prepared. You're ready. Let's talk more about the emotional caretaker identity. And I want to give you some truths here because maybe you're thinking, I overgive because I'm so needy. I used to think that way about myself and I was very hard on myself. And I'd say I'm just, overgiving in a people pleasing kind of way to the point where I feel resentful because I'm so needy. I need that reflection. I need that validation. And I want you to look at it another way. I want you to reframe this. You overgive because you were taught that love equals responsibility. Love is earned. Love comes from fixing and stay even when it hurts because you're responsible to fix this situation. You are the one who's here to fix. And the identity was created in childhood. Like I said, with narcissistic or emotionally immature parents, where your job was to keep the peace, was being the go-between. You had to read the room. You had to know when something was going to go off, and you had to be like, well, I'm going to anticipate this and fix it. I'm going to diffuse the situation. I'm going to stay small, maybe invisible, be easy, be good, all of those things. So now the dating turns into actually emotionally babysitting someone. And even in the first couple of dates, you can kind of see this, or you might feel into this tendency if you're asking your date and you want to get to know them. And then suddenly you find yourself into some of their problems and saying, oh, have you tried this? And I have a book that'd be perfect for that I can get for you next time. And oh, I just watched a YouTube video on this and I'm going to send it to you. So immediately it's like, I'm going to take care of you and I'm going to make sure that you get through this date. So you're already taking care of the other person. Maybe in your mind, you're like, oh, they seem nervous or they seem closed off or afraid to open up about something. So I'm going to be overly caring. I'm going to say, that's okay. Don't be nervous. You're not going to say that in an obvious way or not outright unless you are a very forthright person. Possibly you do say that outright, but your energy is going to be all about taking care of that person, making sure they're comfortable on the date, that they feel okay to open up, that you've created this environment of feeling good so they can open up instead of being attuned to yourself, instead of asking, how am I feeling right now? How do I feel on this date? How do I feel while I'm with this person? You're extending all of your care to the other person and making sure that they're comfortable and set up and emotionally taking care of them to the point where you're not letting them figure things out. And it's like they don't really have to do anything. They don't have to make that effort because you've set it all up and you're doing everything. Okay, another thing is why overgiving feels like chemistry is that as a caretaker, in this identity of emotional caretaker, you feel alive when someone needs you. You feel alive when someone is a puzzle to figure out and they're confusing. You're like, let me figure this out. Let me solve this Rubik's Cube of a person. And if someone's unavailable, it's like, oh, I feel alive when I'm figuring this out and when I can make them see how they can become available or make them see how they can mature emotionally. And that nervous system activation, it feels like chemistry. It feels like intensity. It feels like connection. But it's actually anxiety and hope. It's longing. You're feeling anxious because this is being set off from childhood or from past experiences. You're like, oh my God, my nervous system is all activated to feel turned on in a way to do what I've been meant to do, what I've always been meant to do. I want to underline this because it's not what you were born to do or were meant to do. It's what you were taught to believe you were meant to do. It's not the truth. You were not meant to emotionally caretake others. That is not your job. That's not your responsibility. There's another side of that where you care and hold each other, where you care for and hold yourself, where you give yourself that amazing space. And it's almost like giving your heart a hug. You're taking care of your own heart. And you can extend more compassion from a strengthened, self-trusting, fully realized position rather than depleting all your energy doing this. And this is why a calm man or someone who's very present, very stable, very reliable, you feel relaxed around them. it feels boring because they don't need to be managed. And then you go into the mindset of, well, what do they need me for then? What do they really need me to do? And then you become disinterested. And I can't tell you the amount of times I've talked to women where they say, it was boring. There's no attraction. I didn't feel anything. And it's really what they're saying is, I didn't feel the need to do anything. I didn't feel like they needed a sprucing up, or I didn't need to teach them anything or show them the way. And I'm not saying this in any kind of sarcastic way. I fully embraced this whole identity for much of my life and into my adult life. Maybe you always will have that tendency to be very caring because you are a compassionate and emotionally open and present person, but you don't need to do this in a detriment to yourself. And that's why in the last episode, I talked about healthy love feeling unfamiliar, because healthy love doesn't need convincing. It doesn't need rescuing. It doesn't need emotional labor. So your nervous system says, this isn't love. This isn't attraction. There's nothing for me to do here. And so I want you to think about the fact that the discomfort, that feeling of dissonance within you, because that's not a red flag. It's feeling withdrawal from that pattern. Have you ever been through where you feel like you've got to give, and then you go through a period where you don't have to give as much, or you're on a break from the overgiving, and you feel the sense of withdrawal because you're like, oh, I just really need to overgive. You're not thinking that, of course, but that compulsion has nowhere to go. We're really talking about this identity shift as you're not here to earn love, to prove that you're worthy, to work for the affection, to chase. You're here to receive. What does that feel like in your body? Are you even familiar with that? These are some things you can take journaling time to do. What does it feel like to receive? Who is that woman who receives? This new identity that you're trying on, season 5, we're talking about identity and embodying and integrating all this work and all these beautiful shifts that you've had from season 1 to season 4. Now you're integrating. Now you're showing up as someone who receives, who chooses. You respond. Respond to yourself by saying, how do I feel right now? The caretaker identity says, how do I make this work? And I'm getting goosebumps from that because I would literally be thinking that most of the time in my relationships or dating. I would say, here's a problem. I've got a laundry list of problems within this relationship already, and it's week 1. How do I make this work? How many times have you said that to yourself? How can I fix this and make this work? Instead of saying, the chooser identity says, does this feel good for me? How do I feel in this scenario? How do I feel when I'm around this person? Does this feel good for me? So write these questions down. Does this feel good for me? That's the chooser identity. And the last part I wanted to talk about is why he's not your project. So unavailable men feel magnetizing because they give you a job. They give you something to fix. They give you a purpose if you're in the overgiving caretaker identity. But think of this. Healthy men give you peace, and peace doesn't activate the caretaker. To have a love that feels like home is not having to do anything. You feel like home. You can even try this mantra on. I am home. I intend to experience a love that feels like home. That's a powerful shift. And the integration prompt for yourself this week, you can say, am I relating to him or managing him? That's a very powerful question to ask yourself on a date, after a date or after someone you've met. If there's a bunch of problems and you feel like, okay, I'm going to sit down and think about this. How can I figure this out? You can ask yourself, am I relating to him or managing him? Relating to him is expressing yourself authentically in the moment, being who you are, and self-expression that feels good, and he's taking it in. He's basking in your presence. And there's nothing you need to be like and sit down and write out your spreadsheet of how we're going to figure this out. You know, I've known women who they live in different cities from their partner, and they got to figure out, how can we see each other and how can I make sure that we keep that connection and this and that. And And what's he doing for that relationship to step into presence with you? And I'm not saying long distance relationships don't work. Don't come at me for that. I know sometimes you have to do certain things like finish your schooling or whatever it is, or you have to be away for a certain time. I'm talking about from the get-go, if you're just out of the gate and already there's a huge amount of things to overcome. If you have a lot of things to overcome and it's in the first month, it's not going to get any easier, and you're going to be managing and overgiving and really in that identity. And there is a way through that so that you can detox yourself from that identity and be who you truly are. The wonderful, amazing woman you are. And that's all you need to be, is be yourself and express yourself in that way authentically and connect with someone who's showing up fully like you are, or like you're learning to do, because it is a learning curve. Obviously, if you're going through this identity your whole life, it's not going to be all of a sudden, boom, it's gone. It's going to be a slow becoming. And so if you're ready to stop performing for love, that's the work of becoming emotionally unavailable to unavailable men. You're going from why do I keep giving to I decide who gets access to me. And the next step, if you wanted support with that, to begin that pattern changing, emotional pattern clearing, nervous system safety, letting go of overgiving, I recommend my Magnetic Love Bundle. You can go to stopchasingunavailableguys.com and purchase Magnetic Love Bundle, which is a journal and magnetic pattern changing guided meditations to set you on that path, to give you the next steps. I highly recommend going to check that out. Magnetic Love Bundle, stopchasingunavailableguys.com in my shop. And we'll continue our journey next time for episode 51. We're going to talk about choosing instead of proving, from auditioning to discernment. I can't wait for this. I will see you next time. Thanks for listening. And remember, love is closer than you think.